the 20, 10, 5, Torrey Horton back to the end zone.
28-yard play. Guess who? Body up the middle, making another move to the outside. 15, 10, end zone again.
Keeps it. Nice move by Brown. He's got space. He's got 6. 35-yard touchdown for Byron Brown. A record-setting night for the South Florida quarterback.
Down so far, a little bit of a high snap. Genty right up the middle. Genty has room. Ashton Genty, give him 6.
Second and long. Lagar tries to fit it in. Runnels, it does. Runnels stays up. The Suns offense 4-3 wins. Incredible effort for Royals.
The G5 Hive. All G5, all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive Live. We are excited to bring you the G5 college football coverage you love each and every week. I am Luke, and I'm joined by my co-host, Justice. Hey, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, and a retweet. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. And don't forget, G5 Hive merchandise store is now live. Link is in the YouTube video comments, as well as pinned on our X page.
There you go, right there. I just, matter of fact, I just put it on the bottom of the video. So it's, if you want some merch, you can go to that link below. It's on the X page, and it's now in the video comments as well. All right.
Hey, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're watching us on X, I see that there are several of you watching us on X. Please give us a follow, a like, a retweet. Again, and if you're listening to us in podcast form, stop what you're doing. Go in there, give us a 5-star rating, because we're giving you 5-star information. Justice, we got waiver wire. We're going to make our switch from actual football talk to the fantasy world. Fantasy football talk here going into week 10. We're down through 9 weeks. College fantasy football playoffs are right around the corner. We got 2 weeks.
This week,
a lot of leagues, 2 weeks before.
2 weeks left.
Who are your waiver wire pickups here on quarterback?
All right, let's look at the quarterbacks here. Ben Wildridge, Louisiana, only 28% owned. He's averaging 23.8 points per game, and he's had a rushing touchdown in 4 of his last 5 games. Next up, Parker Navarro, only 14% owned from Ohio. He's a little bit up and down. He sometimes gets benched. If he doesn't get benched, he has a big game. It seems very, very turnover dependent. He has 80+ rushing yards though in 3 of his last 4. As long as he can keep those turnovers under control, he can be a very productive quarterback for your fantasy team. Next up, Spencer Petras, Utah State, 19%. He is on a bye this week. He's also a 2020 guy, so don't want to spend too much time on him. But no Royals or Brock Lane. We'll see kind of if they try to remold this offense coming out of the bye week here in 2 weeks. Next up, Colton Joseph, Old Dominion. We've talked about him a lot tonight. Had a huge game this week. He's only 8% owned. Had his coming out party, if you will. He was my player of the week. He had 300 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns, and then 69 yards rushing, and another touchdown on the ground. He is a dual threat. He right now is kind of clicking on all cylinders for Old Dominion. Definitely, if he is available in your leagues, and I'm not him, you should go grab him. In leagues in most of my leagues, he's already owned. I think there was 1 or 2 he wasn't, and I put in aggressive bids for him, being an Old Dominion fan. All right, next is Owen McCown, 19% owned, UTSA. Again, he's a 2020 guy. As Luke just told you, they are slinging around big time. So if you need a quarterback this week because of buys or whatnot, I know a lot of my teams are in trouble this week because of I have a lot of players with a week 10 bye. Owen McCown, you could do a lot worse than Owen McCown at quarterback. All right, Hunter Watson, Dual threat should be back this week. He is only 8% owned from Sam Houston. Again, like Luke said, look for him to possibly get another 100 yards on the ground this week. So if you're looking for a dual threat quarterback, you might want to take a look there at Hunter Watson. Next up, this guy is new. We haven't talked about him yet. He's kind of taken over that East Carolina Pirate offense, and that's Caden Hauser. He's only 6% owned. He started the last 2 weeks. Over those last 2 weeks, he has 28 points and 27 points and 8 passing touchdowns. Definitely someone that's kind of on the upswing. He's kind of he's a new guy on this list. Folks might not have caught on to him yet, but he looks like he's kind of taken over that East Carolina offense. Next up, we have Cooper Lega, Tulsa. Again, 2% owned. He's very much a boomer bust play. The Tulsa quarterback room has been a mess, but maybe they'll stick with Lega now. He is a dual threat. He led them to that huge comeback win this past week in Week 9, where they were down, was it 28 points, I think it was, in the second half. Cooper Lega was the one to lead them to that win. He scored 37.92 points this game. So, again, if you're kind of desperate for a quarterback, Cooper Lega is someone you can take a look at. Cole Schneider, Eastern Michigan, 7% owned. He's not going to give you a high ceiling, but he does give you a pretty consistent floor. He has had 20-plus points in 3 of his last 4 games. And then this last guy, he's probably a much better – well, he is. He's a much better real-life quarterback than he is a fantasy quarterback. But, again, he gives you a solid floor. And that's Darian Mensah at Tulane, only 12% owned. He doesn't do anything flashy. But he looks like the real deal. He's super accurate. Like I said, again, a really good quarterback, good floor. If you're in a C2C league, he's someone, if he's available, I might be looking at, because I don't know his measurables. I'd have to go look that up. But I mean, the dude is freaking accurate as hell. One of the more impressive quarterbacks from a technical perspective in terms of the G5 guys. All right, let's move over to the running backs. And what do we have, Luke?
All right. And we talked about the injury to Malik Sherrod earlier, but Elijah Gilliams, Fresno State, 10% owned. Sherrod's been out. He's got games of 22.8, 28, and 19.8 points the last 3 games. They've got Hawaii here in Week 10. I anticipate them being able to run the ball pretty well. And I like Elijah Gilliam this week. Ahmad Hardy, UL Monroe, 25% owned. He's a 2020 guy, double-digit carries all season. He's now had 4 100 yards rushing games in a row. 16.7, 14.2, 31.4, and 10.8 points. He had in that loss this last week, you would think that like game script wouldn't favor him a whole bunch because he's not catching the ball. He still had 20 rushes for 104 yards. They've got Marshall here in Week 10. Delbert Mims, the third, Eastern Michigan, 16% owned. Last week, or the last 4 weeks, he's had fantasy outputs of 30.6, 18.5, 14.2, and 17.3. 20-plus touches in 4 straight weeks, 13 targets over the last 4 weeks, too. They've got a tough matchup with Toledo in this week, then a bye before Ohio, Buffalo, and Western Michigan. So you like that schedule there at the end of the season. But yeah, finding like running backs who are getting this type of volume at this point of the season that are still out there, do yourself a favor, go pick up Delbert Mims, Ahmad Hardy, Jaquiz Cross, Arkansas State, 21% owned the last 4 games. He had a dud this last week of a 6.7, but before that he had 33.1, 22.5, and 12.7. Over that stretch, he's seen an opportunity of 16, 25, 15, and 14. Unfortunately, he's only had 2 touchdowns over that time, but he's only had 2 touchdowns, but yet he still gets 33.1, 22.5, 12.7. Again, the dud in 6.7 this last week, but he is an opportunity there. He's 9th in the G5 in receptions per game with 2.9. So he's going to get you 2-3 receptions per game. He's 16th in receiving yards per game with 20.6. So you're going to get 4 points from him a week in just receiving work. So you can do worse than Jaquiz Cross, Arkansas State here. And then my next set of running backs here are kind of some upside. I don't have as much confidence as this group of guys as the previous group. So if you're like, hey, who should I prioritize? I would say prioritize that first group that I just got done talking about. But these are some names to know and some deep additions to your leagues. You've got Elijah Young, or I guess I did not talk about Elijah Young on the previous slide. Sorry. Before, I would also put Elijah Young in this, like, hey, good names to know that I think can help you sooner rather than later. Western Kentucky, 10% owned. He had a bye in week 9, but before that he had 16 plus carries in each of the last 3 weeks, and he's involved in the passing game with 11 targets over the last 3 weeks. They have Kennesaw State in week 10. Sign me up. Now we get into the guys that I'm not as confident in. I need to see a little bit more from them, but we're running out of time, so I want to give you these guys' names. Maybe you feel more confident in them this week. Maybe you're looking for somebody. There's a lot of buys this week, including this first one that I'm going to mention, but I like his schedule the rest of the season is George Pettaway, James Madison, 21% owns. The last 4 weeks, he's seen opportunity of 16, 17, and 20. Only 2 touchdowns over that time, but seen outputs of 10.7, 16.8, 11.1, and 23.3 over that time. Again, I said they got a bye this week, but then Georgia State, ODU, App State, and Marshall, all favorable matchups for against the run game here coming up.
Well, not against ODU. ODU is pretty good against the run. I give you the other ones.
Okay. Georgia State, Michael Dukes. No one's talking about Michael Dukes, and this one's an interesting one. Justice, you had him in here last week. He's a great for PPR plays. His targets the last 4 weeks, 5, 8, 7, and 3. That's equated to fantasy outputs of 6.3, 16.6, 28.9, and 16.4. They've got UConn here in week 10. You got this change in quarterback who only had 5 targets this last week, but I kind of like Michael Dukes for Georgia State this week, especially if you need some help PPR point wise. Half point PPR leagues, I'm not as excited about them. Jordan Simmons, another PPR monster, Akron, 3% owned. He's coming off a game where he had 16 carries for 109 yards, 1 reception for 1 yard. That was good for 12 fantasy points in week 9. The crazy thing is how little he was utilized in this receiving game. 3 weeks ago, he had 5 receptions for 32 yards. He led the team in receptions. He was second on the team in receiving yards. The following week, he had 6 receptions for 97 yards. In that game, he was second on the team in receptions and in receiving yards. He accounts for 10.8% of the team's receptions. He's averaging 18.5 fantasy points over the last 3 weeks. If you are in a point per reception league or a PPR league, give Jordan Simmons a look. Floyd Chalk, San Jose State, 25% owned. We've talked about this quarterback. I don't know what you call it. Merry-go-round, whatever you want to call it. But his last 5 games, he's had fantasy outputs of 21.4, 17.7, 13.1, 15.1, and then this last week he had 8.9. He's seen double-digit carries in those matchups, 6 rushing touchdowns over that stretch. He's going to give you about 80 to 90 yards and a touchdown kind of guy. So if you need something, look for Floyd Chalk. And then another name that I like, even though they've been passing the ball around a lot, is Robert Henry, UTSA, 4% owned. The last 2 weeks, he's seen 20 and 25 opportunities, capitalizing for 15.9 and 18.9 points. They've got Memphis in week 10 before a bye, then North Texas, then Temple. I like Robert Henry as a as an option. Again, they've been passing the ball a lot, but he's been doing work for him the last couple weeks.
All right,
Justice, what do you have for wide receivers?
let's look at Luke Fioria, Kent State. They've been disappointing. They're just in terms of wins. The stats haven't been great. The last couple weeks, but he's only 16% owned. They are on a bye this week, but he does have 14 plus points in 3 of his last 4 games. Hopefully, they can get some things figured out after the bye week, and in 2 weeks come out with guns a-blazing. Next up, Junior Vandeross, Toledo, 16%. A great floor guy. He's averaging just under 16 points per game, and he has 11 plus targets in each of his last 3 games. Florida International wide receiver Dean Patterson. We're going to talk about his teammate here in a minute. 11% owned. He's been a little bit up and down, but he seems to kind of be very in tune with Keon Jenkins. If Jenkins is in there and throwing well, Dean Patterson is going to have a good game. If that's not the case, he's not going to do so great. Adrian Norton, Akron, PPR monster, 11% owned. Other than week 1, Adrian Norton has scored double-digit fantasy points in every contest. So you love to see that consistency. And then rounding out this group, Orrin Singleton, Eastern Michigan, 8% owned, 15 plus points in 3 of the last 5. And this past week, he had 20.2 points in week 9. All right, Kenny Womack leads this next group, 25% owned. Again, he has a bye week this week, so you need to wait 2 weeks for him to produce for you. But he has double-digit points in 4 of the last 5 games. The aforementioned Justin Lockhart, 11% owned, the number 2 wide receiver in an offense that throws the ball a lot. He doesn't necessarily get the amount of targets that Nick Nash does, but he's not too far behind in yards in this offense. Next up, this guy has been coming on really strong with the addition of Caton Hauser at quarterback. That's Chase Sewell, East Carolina, 16% owned. In the last 2 weeks with Caton Hauser at quarterback, he's put up 20-plus points. Kind of getting back into that groove he was in at the end of last year. Next up, Dean Patterson's teammate, and arguably he's the more consistent of the two, and that's Eric Rivers, Florida International, 18% owned. Like I said, he's more consistent than Dean Patterson, and he's getting double-digit points in the last 7 games. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about a new guy to the list this week, someone we haven't talked about in previous weeks. And that's Jaden Smith, Nevada, 14% owned. He's had 12 targets per week in each of the last 2 weeks, and he scored double-digit points in 4 of the last 5. So that's just someone new, wanted to bring to light. Jaden Smith, hopefully they get Brendan Lewis back this week, by all accounts, and Jaden Smith can keep producing for you there at wide receiver.
All right. Tight ends. Is it weird to say there was actually a lot of names that I really liked this week? A couple of the same names, but again, usually we only have like 4 in this one. I have 6 this week. So we've got Dorian Fleming, Georgia State, 2020 guy. He's 26% owned. He's giving you 6 targets, 4 receptions, and 48 yards per game. John Michael Gillenborg, Wyoming, 25% owned. Just 2 weeks ago, he had his monster week of 24.7. He had 10 targets, 137 yards, and a touchdown. Last week, he had a dud, 1.1 point, 1 reception on 4 targets for 6 yards. He's averaging 5 targets and 52 yards. They've got New Mexico in week 10.
Be interesting to see if the quarterback switch affects him.
Yeah, the quarterback is what I am interested in because he's got it. So, like, I would like to have him on my team. I don't think I want to start him until I can see something more out of him. Pat Conroy, you heard of this guy, Justice?
I have. He's targeted quite a bit. I think I dare what I say he's Colton Joseph's favorite receiver.
Since he is 3% owned, ODU, tight end. Since Colton Joseph has taken over at QB, he has seen targets of 7, 7, 3, and 5. He's got 15 yards, 61 yards, 22 yards, and 83 yards, giving you 2.5, 9.6, 3.7, and 15.8 points. They've got App State in Week 10. They might run the ball a lot, but I do like Pat Conroy.
He does get targeted like on some deep shots. Now they don't always like hit him every week. And I think that's what you're seeing there. But I feel like he gets one kind of big play per week.
When you saw this, because we do these separate, when you saw that I had him in here, what were your initial thoughts? Or did you see it? Is this the first time you're seeing it?
No, I saw it earlier and I was like, yeah, I mean, I it makes sense. I mean, I can tell you right now, like I'm in some leagues where I've had some bad, I have bye week blues, so to speak, and I had to pick Pat Conroy up to start him, and and there I think the next guy you're going to talk about were probably the two most common names available in my leagues. So those are the two that I added where I could if I had bye week issues at tight end this week.
That player is Houston Thomas, UTSA tight end, 0% owned, averaging 43 yards per game on 4 targets, only getting 2 receptions per game. He's only got 1 touchdown in the year, but the targets the last 4 weeks, 7, 3, 6, and 10, giving you yardage of 20, 43, 63, 132. You like that upward trend. They've got Memphis in Week 10. We think that this game could be a shootout. Houston Thomas, a guy I'm not hearing about at all that I think could be used here in Week 10. Blake Bosma, Western Michigan, they're on a bye this week, 28% owned. I don't imagine – we might talk about him next week because they've on a bye. Maybe no one's going to pick him up. Points the last 5 weeks, 12.3, 18.4, 5.8, 32.5, and 17.9. They've got this bye week before they've got NIU, Bowling Green, Central Michigan, and Eastern Michigan. So, I mean, Western Michigan versus Central Michigan versus Eastern Michigan, it's going to be directional match-offs, directional school match-offs there in Michigan. But I like Blake going forward the rest of the season. And then Taylor Thompson, James Madison, 28% owned. His last 5 games, target-wise, has been 7, 9, 3, 5, and 3. Fantasy points of 20.1, 10.9, 13.8, 4.6, and 9.5 over that stretch. He's got an average depth of target of 11 and a half. So he's getting that nice usage there. They've got, again, a bye in Week 10 before they've got Georgia State, ODU, App State, and Marshall. So I like Taylor Thompson's outlook for the rest of the season. All right. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of the show. Come back and join us next week as we discuss what happened in Week 10, as well as look forward to Week 11 of the 2024 season. And as always, we bring you up to date on all the latest news and happenings in the world of G5 college football. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're watching us on X, please give us a retweet, a like, and a follow. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and give those 5-star ratings and reviews. Again, Justice has it. If you're watching us on YouTube, the G5 Hive merch store, you can find all of our stuff there. If you want to support us, go buy some merch, support G5 Hive. Thank you all for your support. Until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.